We walk through life with a persistent feeling of being someone, a distinct individual, separate from the rest of the universe. It's as though there's a small, invisible operator sitting behind our eyes, pulling the levers and making decisions, like the captain of a ship navigating through the sea of existence. This sense of being a singular me is so deeply ingrained that we rarely question it. It feels real, solid, undeniable. But what if this me is just an idea? What if it's a story we've been telling ourselves all along? When you try to locate this self, to pin it down and say, here I am, it starts to slip through your fingers. Is it in your thoughts, your memories, your emotions, your body? None of these things on their own can truly encapsulate the self. They're all constantly changing, coming and going like waves on the surface of the ocean. The feeling of I is more like a mirage than a tangible object. It appears to be there, vivid and undeniable, but when you approach it, you find it was never what it seemed. This isn't to say that you don't exist, of course. Something is experiencing this moment right now. But the entity you believe yourself to be, this fixed and separate self, is more of a mental construct than a reality. The illusion persists because it's useful. It gives a sense of continuity, a way to navigate the world and relate to others. Yet it also limits us, creating a false boundary between me and everything else. This boundary makes us feel isolated, as though we're trapped inside our own heads, peering out at a world that's out there separate and apart. But the truth is, you're not an isolated observer standing apart from the universe. You're as much a part of it as a wave is part of the ocean or a leaf is part of a tree. The self you think you are is not a thing, it's a process, an ever-changing flow of experiences and interactions. It's not something you can find, because it was never lost. It's simply the universe looking at itself through your eyes. We often imagine ourselves as operators sitting inside our bodies, controlling them like machines. It's as if the I is a pilot seated in the cockpit of the mind, issuing commands, making decisions, and steering this body through the world. This perspective feels natural because it aligns with how we experience life. There's a sense of being an observer, looking out from behind our eyes, watching the world unfold and reacting to it. This operator-like sense of self gives rise to the idea that we are distinct from our surroundings, like a driver separate from their car or a puppeteer manipulating a puppet. The body and the mind become tools for the ego to wield, and the world becomes an external stage where it performs its roles. In this framework, life appears divided into subjects and objects, self and other, inside and outside. Yet, when you pause to examine this operator closely, it becomes elusive. Where is this I that seems to be in control? Is it in the brain, the thoughts, or the feelings? Is it the decisions we make or the memories we hold? The more you look, the harder it becomes to find a concrete entity that matches this sense of a separate operator. This illusion persists because it's practical. Thinking of ourselves as independent agents helps us navigate the complexities of the world. It allows us to organize our lives and act with others and take responsibility for our actions. But this convenience comes with a cost. It reinforces the idea of separateness, making us feel cut off from the greater whole. In truth, the ego is not a master or a captain. It's more like a filter or a lens. It doesn't control the flow of life, it interprets it, creating a story about me and my experiences. Life itself is happening effortlessly, moment by moment, without the need for a central controller. What feels like an operator is simply the interplay of thoughts, sensations, and perceptions, all arising and passing away in the vast, interconnected web of existence. We live with a persistent sense that we are fundamentally separate from everything around us. This perception begins early in life, as we learn to distinguish between me and not me, between what is part of our body and what exists outside of it. It feels as though there is a clear boundary between ourselves and the rest of the world, as though we are little islands of consciousness surrounded by an ocean of otherness. This sense of separation is reinforced by language and culture. We speak of my body, my thoughts, my life as if these things belong to a distinct, independent owner. We look at the world and see objects, people, and places as external, existing apart from us. Even relationships, which connect us to others, often emphasize the division: there's me over here and you over there, two distinct entities coming into contact. Yet this division is an illusion, a mental construct. When you closely examine the boundaries between self and other, they begin to blur. Consider your breath, for instance. The air you inhale, which seems outside of you, becomes part of your body for a moment before it is exhaled back into the world. The food you eat, the water you drink, these too were once external and are now part of you. Even your thoughts and emotions, which feel so personal, are influenced by the environment, by conversations, by experiences you share with others. The illusion of separation is useful. It allows us to function as individuals, to take care of our needs, and to interact with the world. But it also creates a profound sense of isolation. It fosters the belief that we are alone in a universe of objects, and that our well-being is in competition with the well-being of others. This perception can lead to fear, anxiety, and a constant striving to protect the self from the outside. In reality, the boundaries we perceive are like lines drawn in the sand. They may seem solid at a glance, but a closer look reveals their impermanence. Just as a wave is not separate from the ocean, but a temporary expression of it, we are not separate from the world around us. We are part of the same vast, interconnected whole, flowing and changing together. The sense of separation is a mask, hiding the deeper truth that there is no me, and not me, only one continuous dance of life, where everything belongs. The ego feels like the most real thing we know. It presents itself as solid, stable, and unchanging, this I that we identify with so completely. It seems to persist through all the moments of our lives, anchoring us to a sense of continuity. But when you begin to examine it closely, its supposed solidity starts to crumble. The ego, which feels like the core of who we are, is far more fragile and transient than we imagine. At its heart, the ego is a collection of memories, thoughts, and experiences woven together into a story we call me. It draws upon these elements to create a coherent narrative, convincing us that we are a distinct, enduring entity. But each of these components is fleeting. Memories fade or change over time. Thoughts arise and pass like clouds in the sky. Even the body, which seems like the most tangible part of who we are, is constantly renewing itself, cell by cell. When you try to locate the ego, this me that feels so real, you find it slipping through your fingers. Is it in the brain? The heart? The thoughts that come and go? Or the sense of awareness that seems to witness it all? The harder you look, the more elusive it becomes. It's like trying to grab hold of a shadow. The closer you get, the more it reveals itself to be an illusion. This fragility is not a flaw, it's simply the nature of what the ego is. It's not a solid thing, but a process, a verb rather than a noun. It's an ongoing activity, a constant shaping and reshaping of identity in response to the world around us. The ego constructs itself moment by moment, using whatever it has at hand, creating the illusion of stability in the midst of change. The fragility of the ego becomes evident in moments of crisis or profound change. When the story we've told ourselves no longer fits, when we lose a job, a relationship, or a role we've identified with, it can feel as though the very ground beneath us has been pulled away. This is because the ego depends on these external elements to define itself. When they shift or disappear, the ego is forced to adapt, revealing its impermanence. Understanding the fragile nature of the ego can be liberating. It shows us that we are not bound by the roles or identities we've constructed. Just as the ego is constantly changing, so too are we free to change, to grow, and to step beyond the narrow confines of me. The recognition of this fragility allows us to embrace a deeper sense of self, one that is not tied to the fleeting constructs of the mind, but to the vast, interconnected flow of existence. The ego, despite being an illusion, plays a crucial role in how we navigate and interact with the world. It serves as a practical tool, a kind of functional map that helps us orient ourselves in a complex and often chaotic reality. Without the ego, we would struggle to differentiate ourselves from others. to establish goals, or to make sense of our daily lives. It gives us the ability to make decisions, set boundaries, and engage in social roles. It creates structure and stability in a world that can otherwise feel overwhelming or disorienting. The ego organizes our experiences, giving them meaning and coherence. It helps us process the world around us, labeling things and events according to their relevance to me. When we identify with the ego, it's like having a personal guide that tells us what's important and how we should respond. The ego's influence becomes evident in the way we identify with our work, our family, or our social circles. It gives us a sense of purpose, a way to assert our existence and navigate through the world with intention. It allows us to say, "This is who I am," and to hold that identity steady as we move through life. This utility of the ego becomes most apparent in social interactions. When you meet someone new, your ego helps you place them within a framework. Are they a friend, a colleague, a rival? It helps you understand your role in relation to theirs, providing context and allowing for cooperation, conflict, and communication. Without this structure, social life would be chaotic and confusing, as there would be no sense of who we are in relation to others, and no understanding of how to interact with them. In the practical realm, the ego is necessary for survival and success. It helps us pursue goals, make plans, and take action. When you decide to pursue a career, a relationship, or a personal achievement, it is your ego that drives the motivation to succeed, to improve, and to achieve. It gives you the energy to act, to push forward, and to overcome obstacles. Without a sense of self-interest and identity, we would lack the motivation to strive for anything in the world. Yet this utility of the ego, while necessary, can also limit us if we identify with it too strongly. It can create attachments, fears, and desires that narrow our vision, locking us into a small, isolated view of reality. The more we cling to the ego, the more we reinforce the boundaries between ourselves and others, between the self and the world. But even though it has its limitations, the ego's practical function is undeniable. It is what enables us to live as distinct individuals, to carve out our place in the world, and to relate to the people around us. In this way, the ego is both a tool and a barrier, useful, but not the whole picture of who we truly are. The ego presents itself as a solid, stable entity, something we can rely on, something that gives us a sense of continuity. It feels as if we are anchored to this central, unchanging I, a permanent observer who watches the world pass by from a fixed position. We identify with this self as if it were a concrete, enduring thing. But the more we examine it, the more this sense of solidity begins to unravel. The I we so deeply believe in is not solid at all. It is, in fact, an illusion. At the heart of the ego is a collection of thoughts, memories, desires, and perceptions. Each of these components is fleeting, shifting with every passing moment. Our thoughts arise and disappear, like clouds passing through the sky. Our memories change as we reinterpret the past with new experiences and insights. Even the body, which we often associate so strongly with self, is in constant flux. Cells dying and regenerating, the very atoms that make up our body constantly being replaced. What we take to be a stable, permanent me is actually a fluid, ever-changing process. It's like a river constantly flowing, where the water may appear the same, but it is never the same from one moment to the next. The river of the self is continuously shaped by new experiences, new thoughts, new sensations. The more we try to grasp this, the more elusive it becomes. It's like reaching for a shadow. What you think is solid and real is actually a dynamic, ephemeral phenomenon. This illusion of solidity is reinforced by the mind's tendency to create boundaries. We draw lines between me and you, between mine and yours, between self and other. These lines feel sharp and clear, as if they were natural and permanent. But when you look closely, you realize these boundaries are arbitrary, constructed by the mind to help make sense of a complex world. In reality, the space between things is not fixed, it's in constant motion, like the ebb and flow of the tides. Our sense of solidity is also influenced by our cultural and social conditioning. We are taught to see ourselves as separate entities distinct from the rest of existence. We are told that I am me and that you are you, and we spend our lives reinforcing these separations. But beneath this social conditioning lies a deeper truth. There is no solid, unchanging I. What we consider to be me is simply a dynamic interaction between consciousness and the world, a process, not a permanent object. When we begin to realize that the self is not a solid, enduring entity, a shift occurs. The boundaries we've built around ourselves begin to soften, and with them the sense of isolation that accompanies the ego. We start to see that there is no permanent I standing apart from the world. We are part of a vast, interconnected flow, constantly evolving, constantly changing. The illusion of solidity dissipates, revealing a more fluid, open, and expansive view of existence. There is a certain cosmic irony at the heart of existence, an underlying humor woven into the fabric of the universe itself. We live our lives convinced that we are separate, distinct beings, each one striving to control, to achieve, to hold on to some sense of I amidst the chaos. We take ourselves so seriously, believing that the universe is a grand puzzle to be solved, a mission to be completed, as if there was some ultimate purpose waiting for us to discover. Yet the great cosmic joke is that the very idea of this I we cling to is itself a creation, an illusion, a fleeting image in the vastness of the cosmos. In a way, the universe laughs at our attempts to grasp it, to categorize it, to name it. It's as though we are children playing with a toy that we think is the most important thing in the world, never realizing that the toy is just part of a much larger play. We look for meaning in places where meaning doesn't exist, and we search for permanence in a world that is ever-changing. The harder we try to hold on, the more it slips away, as if the universe is winking at us and saying, "You think you have it figured out? Well, wait until tomorrow." It's in this paradox that the humor resides. We strive to define ourselves, to carve out a solid, enduring identity, when in fact we are more like actors in an improvised play. The script is being written moment by moment, and the role we play is not fixed, it's fluid, temporary, and always subject to change. And yet we take ourselves so seriously, as if our performance on this stage were the most important thing in the world. The universe doesn't seem to care about the distinctions we make between me and you, between right and wrong, between success and failure. It doesn't follow our plans or adhere to our rules. It unfolds with an effortless grace, indifferent to the self-constructed dramas we create. The more we try to control, the more it becomes evident that we are not the center of the universe, we are simply part of it, a fleeting moment in an ever-flowing stream. This cosmic humor is not cruel, rather, it is an invitation to lighten up, to stop taking ourselves so seriously, and to embrace the mystery of existence. When we let go of our need to define everything, to control everything, we find ourselves laughing along with the universe at the absurdity of it all. We see that the search for meaning is itself a part of the play, and the pursuit of identity is just another dance in the cosmic rhythm. The joke is that there's no punchline, we're all in this together, a beautiful, strange, and temporary performance. And when we realize that, we can finally laugh, because in the end, the whole thing is a glorious, spontaneous, and wonderfully confusing adventure. The potential for liberation exists within us all, hidden beneath the layers of identification with the ego and the narratives we have built about ourselves. We live under the illusion that freedom lies in acquiring more things, more achievements, more status, but in truth, the deepest liberation comes not from gaining but from shedding. The freedom we seek is already within, though it's obscured by the stories we tell about who we are and what we must become. To understand this liberation, we must first recognize the chains that bind us. These chains are not made of metal or rope, they are the mental constructs we cling to, the I that believes it is separate, the me, that thinks it must defend itself against the world, the identities we've built around roles, labels, and expectations. The ego thrives on these constructs, drawing strength from them, creating a sense of solidity and permanence where none exists. Yet all of these are illusions, and they are the very things that imprison us in a cycle of striving, achieving, and never quite feeling whole. When we begin to see through the illusion of the ego, we start to loosen the grip of these chains. The realization that the self we identify with is not as fixed as we think opens up the possibility for a new kind of freedom. This freedom is not about escaping the world or withdrawing from it, but about stepping into it without the heavy burden of self-importance. It's the freedom to be fully present, to experience life as it is, without the filter of judgment, fear, or desire. In this state, we are no longer trapped by the need to control, or to define everything. We become like the river, flowing with life rather than fighting against it. Liberation also comes from seeing that the boundaries between self and other are arbitrary. We've created divisions where none truly exist. We see ourselves as separate, isolated from the rest of the world, yet everything we experience is interconnected. Every thought, every feeling, every action ripples through the vast web of existence, touching everything and everyone. When we realize this interconnectedness, we are freed from the illusion of separation, and with that freedom comes a profound sense of peace. The key to liberation lies in surrendering to this truth. We must let go of the need to cling to identity, to labels, and to the illusion of control. In surrendering, we don't give up our agency or individuality, but we release the tension that comes with trying to maintain a false sense of control. We open ourselves to the flow of life, embracing it as it is, without the need to force it into the shape we think it should take. This doesn't mean a passive resignation, but rather a dynamic, conscious participation in the unfolding of life, knowing that we are both a part of it and, in many ways, its very expression. True liberation is not a final destination or a fixed state, it's a continuous unfolding, a process of becoming more attuned to the present moment and the true nature of reality. It's the freedom to be who we really are beneath the layers of conditioning and false identities. It's the freedom to realize that we are not the small, isolated me we've always believed ourselves to be, but an expression of the greater whole, flowing with the currents of existence. In this recognition, we find peace not because the world becomes any less complex or challenging, but because we are no longer trapped by the illusion of separation. We are free to be, to experience, and to flow with life as it unfolds. In the end, the journey we embark upon isn't one of acquisition or striving to become someone, but rather the shedding of illusions and the realization of our true nature. The ego, with all its stories and identities, may serve a purpose, but it is not who we truly are. It is a fleeting, fragile construct, a temporary narrative that arises and fades, much like the waves of the ocean. When we stop identifying so strongly with this illusion, we see that we are not separate from the world, but an integral part of it, a dynamic expression of the vast, interconnected whole. Liberation isn't something to be attained or grasped, it is the natural result of letting go, of realizing that the boundaries we perceive are not real. The cosmic humor lies in the fact that the more we strive to control, to separate, and to define, the further we stray from the freedom that is already here. The greatest freedom comes when we stop clinging to the idea of a fixed self and embrace the flow of life as it is, fluid, interconnected, and constantly changing. And so, in this realization, we are free. Not because we have achieved something, but because we've stopped pretending that there is something to achieve. The liberation we seek is already within, waiting for us to recognize it in the present moment, in the silence between thoughts, in the space where we stop trying to control and simply allow ourselves to be. This is the liberation that comes when we stop looking for ourselves and instead recognize that we are the universe, experiencing itself in this fleeting, beautiful moment,